There, Kokoda in Syria, Mortar, Dueling in the Second World War. In 1941, 2nd 25th Battalion joined and the brigade joined with the POMs and a couple of Indian battalions to fight the Vichy French and the French Foreign Legion and the Arab peoples in Syria to take it off the Vichy French. I have a little verse for you, so here goes. Duel and Johnno of the 2nd 25th were in Syria in 1941. They were surrounded by the French Foreign Legion with 75mm cannon and machine gun. Their mortar position was in a 100-gallon pit. They'd plonked the Vichy French just a bit. A wounded calf was still bellowing with the shrapnel if it was hit. 3 men tried to help it. 3 Aussies died, calf blown to bits. Charley had his own gun pit and was snug in his private hole. A 75 shell blew the tree away, but it hadn't parted his soul. It blew the tree out of the ground, but never got him. 4 out of 10 survived to live on that bit of battered hill. 10 gaze, cannon shell, the shock and hell. The nightmare lingers still. Bloody shell shock, eh? 1942 in New Guinea, green, when sudden death was all around. Duel fought a Jap mountain gun, a screaming 75mm round. It would explode in the treetops and shrapnel slice your hide. Many Aussies caught a bit and some of them they died. The mountain gun was after Norm and his mortar team just a bit. So Norm went behind a nearby hill, burned the mountain gun, that's it. Unlike the mortar, the mountain gun couldn't hit and kill. Safe behind the hill they plonked away, and then the gun they killed. As Norm said, the gun couldn't get enough elevation to drop a shell on them, and the old mortar could, of course, and for a change the mortar had the advantage and won the fight. Like Don Johnson. Yeah, as the old fellow said, George Gibson was my offside, and we were in Syria in 1941. We had mule teams, and we were bringing supplies to the troops. And we were trying to get a stubborn roan mule up onto another terrace. We were near the coast on the side of a mountain, and we were amongst the olive groves that were planted on those terraces. These terraces looked like the steps for a giant to walk up this mountainside, and we would pull a few stones from the terrace bank to climb onto the next terrace with the mules. A German cruiser offshore started shelling our position, and a giant shell came tumbling end over end towards us and landed between George and me on its side, but it didn't explode. So George stepped down and I stepped up, and we then each put a foot on it. Don said, "If that don't kill us, nothing will." We then both agreed we would be there when the war ended, and we were. We were bringing supplies to our troops in the front line with the 13 mules. Away offshore were some ships of the German Navy. They soon commenced firing broadsides at our position. The turf was doing a bit of rock and rolling at the time. All the mules were eventually killed, some by artillery shells, others by machine gun fire. They died around me daily. The last mule was killed by a 75mm artillery shell fired by the French. It was armour-piercing type, and it hit him between the shoulders and went right through him without exploding. Don was leading this mule down to get him a drink when he was hit and killed instantly. Don was cut off at this time and surrounded by the French Foreign Legion. Don scraped out a hole to bury this last one of his mules on the rocky ground. We were trapped on top of a hill on about half an acre, and were standing the French troops off the position. To bury his mule, Don used his bayonet and a steel hat to dig a 3-foot grave to put the mule underground. Eventually he got him in the hole by trimming to fit the hole. He was under cover. They were there for 10 days then, being shot at. Constant artillery fire. The mule started to swell up and lift out of the hole, so he was hard pressed to keep him covered on this granite hill. He was everlasting burying that mule. It got to a stage that there were 7 left alive, and 4 out of the 7 were wounded. Don said they were having a party there, him and Norm. Then at last A Company broke through and brought a bit of tucker and a few cartridges. Old George, he went down to HQ and returned with a letter for Don. It was his 22nd birthday. He opened the letter, and it was a bill from a store in Durbanty in Australia for £2.12 and 6. Anyhow, the bill came from Rod Graham, and Don vowed straight away never to pay it. It was a bad birthday present. One man amongst the survivors on the hill had used a dugout. He was sitting in it. He had been sitting there earlier with his head close against a tree. The frog artillery blew the tree out of the ground and never parted his hair. A white-faced calf had got a bit of shrapnel in his ear and was going round and round in circles. Then 3 of our boys got killed trying to catch the calf to move the shrapnel. Don said they had this nice little gun pit with a mortar in it, and the hole was the size of a 100-gallon tank or so. They were on the point of a ridge, and the French had fired about 1,000 shells at the pit and missed. They had to drop one in it to knock it out. Anyhow, the men were all severely shell-shocked at this time. Abby Myatt, the officer, said, "Pull the gun out of there and move." And they were dead crooked on him, but after they moved back 50 yards, the French landed a shell right in the hole where they had been sitting. Old Abby had saved their bacon. Anyway, Abby and Don, they got up onto the roof of the house. It was built among the rocks. It was half underground. They were being shelled heavily and were trying to spot the enemy batteries from the roof with a spyglass, so that Abby and the team might lob some mortar bombs amongst them. The roof was built with a slope on it, and it was made of mud. A shell skidded between Abby and Don across the roof with a zip sound, but no explosion. Anyway, Abby was an officer, and they were one of the few officers left after the New Guinea campaign. They made him the CO for a while there. He deserves recognition. He was still there to see the finish in New Guinea. Abby survived the war. Thank you by Don Johnson.